Welcome into another exciting episode of Just Another Podcast, hosted by yours truly, Just Another Chris. In today's episode, I invited a special guest, Stephen Glickman. We go way back. I met him when I was about 18 years old, working for UPS. Yeah, I was his helper for deliveries during the peak season. Boy, do we dive down some deep rabbit holes. We talk about copyright on photography. Who owns the photos? We also talk about consent when it comes to photography. Should you over edit your photos? Should you shoot JPEG or RAW? And we kind of have some deep conversations about the world. Pretty interesting one. Pretty excited. Without further ado, let's dive on into episode 5 of Just Another Podcast. Enjoy. Steve.
Yeah.
What is up, man?
I don't even know.
I know. I kind of just told you, hey, want to come in? And I didn't tell you anything.
You said show up, and I said, okay, and that is all I know.
So, yeah, typically I could let people know, like, the topics and everything that we'll be going over, how long it'll take. I didn't do that with you. Don't know why, but I guess just decided to be mean to you.
It really comes down to, like, where we know each other from.
Yes, and that's why I did want to get into that, actually. That was one of the main things I wanted to talk about was, like, how we met and just how we've, like, stayed in contact ever since then. So you worked at UPS.
Yes.
You were a driver. And you retired, what, a couple years ago, right?
About 3.5 years ago now.
Yeah. And we just got out of the lovely, well, it's probably still going on, but the old peak season of UPS with massive holiday shoppers. And that's where I came into the picture because I was your helper.
Yes. And you were a good helper.
That's good.
which is really, when you have somebody and you can rely on them to show up and they know what to do and they do it, those people are gold. And I mean, it was kind of funny because at first I didn't really stay in touch with people, but really with Facebook coming around, I started to, just add my helpers as, as friends and stayed in touch with people. And then what would happen, like in your case, really, is you started branching out and kind of finding your own path. I found that really interesting, and there were reasons for us to connect with regards to that. Yeah. Some people are just kind of like one-trick ponies, but you are not.
I've done a lot.
But you really were. I mean, there was also this thing that probably in the middle of my career as a driver, I started getting into this thing where someone would be like, oh, I used to play football in high school. And then I was like, okay, then, that, like, now I know that I have somebody who's been pushed really hard. And I did have a guy later on who had played rugby. Anytime when someone was an athlete, they tend to be really, really good. They were reliable. They took direction really well, and they were just, their head was in it the whole time. And you got someone sitting next to you in a job where nobody's ever with you. You kind of have to like that person.
Because it was like a random, you got assigned to a driver.
Yeah.
And I remember one of the times I wasn't assigned to you, I'd been working with you for like probably a couple of weeks, and then I got assigned to somebody else, and it was not fun. Like, working with you was fun. Like, we had a good time. I remember Tropic Thunder had come out that year.
Oh, yeah.
This was like 2008, I think is when I was, or maybe 2009 when I was your helper. And I just remember us just like rocking out to Ludacris and singing that one song from the movie.
But also it was, so my wife hates Forrest Gump.
Yes,
and I think that we also were able to like really go into that.
I got really, really good at Forrest Gump impression. That's where I learned it. I haven't done it in a long time, so it's probably rusty. But I remember like us just like talking about like packages and where they're gonna go, but just in a Forrest Gump accent.
Yeah, you know what? You actually came before I had finally worked out this whole shtick. I get a new helper, and I'd say, okay, so here's the deal: you're not getting paid enough to get hurt. And if you get hurt, you are going to ruin my day. The day that you get hurt is a day that's going to be a total disaster for me. So we're not going to have that happen. The second thing is that we're not going to go fast because you're going fast. We're going to go fast because our routine is smooth. Mm-hmm. So all you got to do, you don't have to run. You don't have to do anything heroic. We're just going to go. And before you know it, things are really going to go smoothly. And that's kind of what you maybe have experienced, but I wasn't as explicit as I was later with my helpers. I was like, look, there's like, just don't get hurt.
Yeah. Because I remember also the helpers didn't get like overtime. as well. So you were always making sure like you're done for the day at like a certain time because you still have to continue on.
Yeah.
As a lot of times we didn't finish, and it was also the year like typically how long does a helper season usually last? Like a couple month or so, month and a half.
I think I was usually getting helpers sometime like mid-November maybe.
Because I remember we got a massive snowstorm and I ended up working all the way into January. It was like 3 so months maybe doing the helper stuff. I was pretty much only assigned to you after that. Like I can't remember his name. AJ, I think maybe his name was. It was terrible.
First of all, I have to say, like, you were pretty young when you were my helper. You were like
19.
Yeah, 18 or 19. And the thing was that, like, you were recently out of high school. You didn't really know what you wanted to do. You had some ideas, and you were like, you were just a kid.
Yeah.
And I think that one of the things, we were in touch, and you started working for a company, and you were near my next route, but you were actually off of it. And one day you were like, I'm not going to be at this location in Battleground not much longer. And I came over, and the thing was, it's almost like, when you get your lens into focus, you're like, oh, yeah, I have the framing, I have what I want, but it's not crisp. You started working in collectibles, and you were like, I'm not really interested in like coaching high school football anymore. I'm not unsure what I want to do. And then you got much crisper and much sharper about what you wanted to do. And then after that, when you opened your own shop, you started realizing that you wanted to be into audio video production.
Yeah.
And that changed things again. Like the difference between you at 19 and the difference between you at 29 was like wildly different. Yeah. And that for me, that was really great to see somebody who I liked to really develop and to see that, which is one of the reasons why I stay in touch with some of the people who were my helpers, not all of them, but sure. I generally had good experiences with helpers.
That's cool. I remember we delivered to a lot of places, and I got hired at one of the places that we delivered to. So I got to even hang out with you at least once a week because you would deliver to the place that I worked at. And that's a crazy story with that place too. I don't know if you ever found out or heard anything. It was on the news. Like CNN was reporting on it.
Oh, really?
Dude, it was insane. They basically got in trouble for the business was they did testing on diesel and biodiesel fuels and stuff, did R&D and things.
I vaguely remember that you worked for a company. And that was, one of the reasons that it's been great to stay in touch with you is some of the crazy stories that have come out of your experiences. But, you start off and, I'm talking to you and you're like, high school's right in the rearview mirror. Like, I think that you might have been dating somebody and it was like, that was somebody that you had dated in high school or something like that. So it's like, you're really not far from being a kid. And then, recently I talked to somebody and they needed some AV help. And of course, you're like the first name that came to mind. I know that you set up people's, studios, video, audio, and I knew that you're someone that could be trusted, which is also like, that's one of the great things about UPS is that there's a vetting system at UPS that's like you're handling people's property. You have to, you say you're going to do something, you do it. It really matters. And so I can send you anywhere into anybody's home or business knowing that you are as good of, give them as good a chance of getting what they want as anybody.
Yeah. Yeah. I kind of grew up that way. I feel like we don't half-ass stuff. If you're going to do it, you're going to do it right. That's kind of how
I think that you talked to me a little bit like how your mother had got you into the idea of like, hey, sometimes you sell stuff.
Yeah.
And getting that and you got that. I didn't really get that as a kid, but you did. And that was something that I think that you have an entrepreneurial spirit. And you didn't lean into it at 19, but you definitely lean into it now, which is great.
Yeah. Well, I opened the store when I was 24.
Yeah.
Yeah. And but I learned real quick I didn't want to work for somebody. I just couldn't do it because I would bust my ass and I wouldn't kiss ass, but I would bust my butt to like do the job right, and all these other people would always get, the accolades because they're like best friends with the manager or whoever, right? And I just hated that.
What's really funny is your entire career working for other people was before COVID.
It's true.
The way in the NFL they was talking about like, oh, this guy's a lockdown corner. Like, that side of the field is protected. And you're always looking for someone like that. For UPS, my whole thing was, if you give me an assignment, I'll do it. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying I'm the best. I'm just saying that you don't have to worry about this, that this is pretty much under control. Whenever you have someone like that, I think that it used to be that people were like, well, of course you're going to do that because, I've hired you. It's like I'm doing you this big favor. And now people have realized that it's a mutually beneficial relationship. And if you don't take good care of your employees, you're in trouble. So, I mean, at some point, if your business grows, you're probably going to have to hire somebody.
Yeah.
And then you're going to have to treat them the way that you would want it to be treated.
It's so true. I would want to hire somebody here so bad. That would be awesome. And yeah, just treat them, give them, basically I wouldn't treat them like as they're an employee or whatever. Just treat them as like they're my, not really a friend, because you have to kind of separate a little bit between like boss and coworker versus employee and stuff, but still treat them like they're a part of something greater than just a paycheck. There's a lot that goes into that I've learned from some of these other people, especially at that fuel place I ended up working at for like 2 years after working with you at UPS.
Whew. Yeah, they were playing fast and loose with facts and something that where you really should not be doing that.
The short story of what that happens, I really want to make a documentary about this because it's a pretty wild story. But the short story is they got a whistleblower that trained me when I was there. He left and then blew the whistle on the company for falsifying test results and not having the right equipment and things. And the Como News randomly showed up. For those at home, that's just like a news station out of Seattle, I believe.
Yeah.
And they just barged in with camcorders. Wow. I dated myself there. But cameras, and you can see me. I still have the original news reporting of this, but they supposedly basically stole from taxpayers about $750,000 in falsified test results because we would do all the gas stations and for just the diesel fuel and biodiesel fuels.
But, of course, the best thing to do is not do something wrong in the first place.
That is crucial
to
do. But, this place, they got away with it pretty much. They got, a slap on the wrist and had to pay a fine. I got fired for it, though, even though I had nothing to do with it. I got called into a interview room by the police.
Uh-huh.
They told me I wasn't under arrest or anything. They just wanted to know information about the owner. The owner was an idiot. Basically what happened was there was a general manager of the place. Then when he went on vacation, and all of a sudden these test results weren't being made or done. We didn't know. They came to me like, "Hey, why aren't you doing this?" I was like, "I have no idea what that is." Turns out he'd just been writing in fake numbers, and so the owner knew about this for like a year plus, and still continued. And then, he once the news showed up, he kicked him out, and told everybody to hang out in the front office, and we kept hard copies of every test result we've done. And he went into the back with the new general manager, and which just doesn't make any sense to me to this day. He got a little hand cart, got all the file cabinets, and walked them out in front of us out to his car.
Oh God, it's just,
right.
It is really crazy. There was a point at UPS where I was working part time, and I had a really great supervisor, and he told me and this other guy, you guys are running the front end. I'll just check in with you if you need anything, but you guys I trust you guys to run things. So we would get new employees all the time, and they would start, it was unloading trailers. So they were in our area that we had control of, and I would tell every single one of them, there's nothing worth stealing from UPS. It's not worth losing this job. But I will tell you this. I'm telling you now not to steal something. So what I'm telling you is if I see you stealing something, I will absolutely report you. And I will get paid for it. And I will take that money and I will buy something and I'll be really happy about it. So I'm telling you now, don't be like, yeah, I can't believe you turned on me. No, because I'm telling you right now.
I'll make some money.
I'm going to make money from turning you in. So do not steal something. And I used to say the same thing with helpers. Look, we're not asking, I'm not going to ask that much from you, and I'm not going to ask you to kill yourself. Mm-hmm. But also, I'm relying on your honesty. Just do the job. And that's where I had a lot of really good experiences. I just always try to treat my helpers with respect.
Yeah, no, I got that sense right from the beginning. Yeah, I liked working with you. The job was actually pretty fun. We got to talk to a lot of people, meet interesting folks. I remember after the job was coming to an end, or was about to come to an end, I was just going to all those places to try and get jobs. That's how I got the job at the fuel place.
Yeah.
In the first place was I just kept going back like every week and wore them down enough just to give me a job in the like the shipping department, just for like a couple weeks. And then the guy that ended up leaving the whistleblower needed help in the lab, and so he brought me in there to help for the day. And they're like, "Oh, this guy's kind of knows what he's doing." And so I became eventually running the lab, doing chemistry work and stuff.
Just the way that you got the job is entrepreneurial, because you just went out there and advocated for yourself. And that's something that people, I think, are getting more of now. I had a helper probably about 10 years after you were around, 9 or 10 years, and he was a young kid, and he was from a very interesting family. Like, he had a good relationship with his mother and his father, but his father was a little shaky, and he was in Battleground, and he was from he was more conservative, and he was my helper during the 2016 peak season. Ooh. And he was like, "Oh, well, I support Donald Trump." And the thing about this kid, and he's the only person I ever had as a helper did this, but he just knew how to get my goat. But also, I never got really mad at him about it. Mm-hmm. And he just knew. He knew he was getting me, and I knew he was getting me. And then I'd be like, "Oh, you just got me." But ultimately, that was one of our ways of having fun. Every year was a little bit different. For that year, it was just like he was kind of a wise guy, and he was funny, and he knew he knew when he got my goat. And the funny thing was that there was a couple of times when he said something, and I just said, "Look, I know we're joking about a lot of stuff, but this is kind of serious, and I just want you to know." And he'd be like, "Okay, fair enough," because I didn't just get mad at him because I disagree with them, but it was its own weird way of being kind of a funny time. And it also is important to remember that there are people who you disagree with about stuff who you can still really enjoy being around. Mm-hmm. And I think that people need to remember that as well. And it is hard to remember. It's easy to say.
Oh, yeah.
But it's easy to say, it's easy to remember, it is hard to execute.
I was talking about this in the previous episode of the podcast, actually, with Jake, my cousin Jake, for those at home. But anyway, I like to surround myself with people that think a little bit differently and see the world differently, or have different points of views, whether it be from something simple as like movies or even politics and stuff, because it helps me to like keep an open mind when it comes to things, because it's really easy to fall into like a rut of like, it all and your mind can't be changed and things. And I think everyone should have an open mind going into anything. And so I surround myself with some people that I don't really necessarily agree with all the time, but they get me thinking. I got a friend, shout out to you, Jordan, love you, buddy. But some of the stuff that he says and does and is like, it can be questionable, and especially with like politics and some other things. I'm like, okay, it's interesting. I never thought of it that way, so it's cool to see, but I still don't agree with it, but I still learned something. So I like hanging out with those types of people.
Yeah, I have one friend in particular. I was in school with him in 7th, 8th, 9th grade, and he is a absolute stand-up guy. Mm-hmm. Like, he's a wonderful person, and I know that about him. So no matter what I disagree with him about, or no matter what kind of conflict I have with him, I know at the beginning of the day and at the end of the day, he's a really good guy. Mm-hmm. And so, you have to make sure that that people sometimes say, like, I attack the idea but not the person. But there comes a point where it's like, maybe just dial back attack. Maybe attack is the right way to go anyway. And, I think that it's kind of tough, because sometimes the people that you disagree with are not open-minded. Regardless of where they are on the political spectrum, they may not be open-minded. Yeah. And that's really where you have to start, is you just have to say, like, hey, I might not know everything. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I've told my kids is that there are 4 pieces of news that you can get. There's something good about someone you like. There's something bad about someone you like. There's something good about someone you don't like. And there's something bad about someone you don't like. And of course, you want to believe the good stuff about the person you like and the bad stuff about the person you don't like. And you don't want to believe the bad stuff about the person you like and vice versa. And I said, as soon as you have a strong feeling one way or the other about like, I don't want to believe this or I do want to believe this, you should immediately start fact checking.
Yeah.
And not just like, oh, I see one source said it, but like see another one. Maybe see a what I used to look for a lot of times is I would go to Fox News and say, well, if they're willing to say that this is the case, then it's the case. Like I don't want to just see one news source. And again, sometimes you go to the news source that doesn't want to say something bad about the people that they like. I don't know what to tell you, and that's where you get the thing where you can't really have a reasonable discussion with somebody who's not going to be willing to be reasonable, even when it's uncomfortable.
Similarly related, but not quite, but it kind of goes to what I kind of try to do on my YouTube channel where it's, so like say I'm reviewing a product of like a camera, and a hot topic on the channel is the Polaroid Now Plus. It's a type of camera that's Polaroid's put out, and reviewers aren't really like saying anything negative about it. It's just here it is reading the specs of the camera and whatever, and that's it. And then I come along and test it and say, hey, this actually isn't a good camera. And I'm the only one out there that has a video claiming that it's bad. And so everyone is like thanking me, or like, no, no, everyone else is saying it's fine, but you are not saying that, or you're the only like the outlier type of thing. Take that information, feedback from the people, and like, maybe I am wrong. Maybe it is actually good. So I'll revisit the topic, research it, and continue to go into like my findings and report back to everybody. And it turns out, yes, the camera is bad.
One thing that you can say is, let's say there was a new Polaroid camera and it had a feature that you've wanted for so long. And you might get excited about it and be like, I love this camera. This is, I can't explain how happy I am. This is really, and someone will be like, it's a Polaroid. It's not digital. It's not blah, blah, blah. And you go, oh, I understand that, but it meets my needs in a very specific way. Now you've explained why you like it. And someone else should be able to go, oh, okay, well, I don't have that need, but I mean, it's cool that there's something that meets a specific need of yours. And that's the thing about even any movie, show, TV, or just technology. I try to explain what it is that I like about something. And then, like I am like, I always say to people like the religion I was raised in isn't as important to me as the fact that I use Apple products. It's like, and I was talking to my daughter and I'm like, you should get an Apple laptop. You're doing a lot of creative stuff. And she's like, for stuff I'm going to be doing, I'll probably need to have a PC. And I'm like, how could you turn on me? I'm my own daughter.
Sacrilegious.
But when people have a Samsung phone or another phone and they're like, well, this has this thing and Apple doesn't. And I'm like, okay, first of all, you're right. That's just a fact.
Yeah.
And second of all, like, great. I'm glad you like your phone. Also, this will probably come to the iPhone in 2 or 3 years, and then Apple will make it seem like they invented it. I'll know it's BS. You'll know it's BS, but I'll finally have it. And the reason I'll have it is because you had it first.
Yeah.
So that's a situation where there actually is, something along the lines of free market competition, and it is benefiting consumers. So bring it on. And it's the same thing with movies. If there's a movie out there and you don't love it, just know that like maybe they're developing technology or they're highlighting an actor or an actress that you will come to appreciate in another vehicle, and that's, actually, the funniest thing is I'm involved in a lot of community radio, and I am involved with this show called Rogue Apostles, Wednesday, 6 a.m. and replay on KXRW.FM. And we get into like really heated, but very, fun discussions about food. So things like candy corn is trash.
Yeah, I probably agree with that.
And I like candy corn. I'm not going to sit there and just like, eat it like Tic Tacs.
But if it's there, I'll eat it.
Right. But it's like, but for some people, one of the hosts is really funny because he's absolutely adamant that he really doesn't like Panera. And so we can just talk to each other and be like, I thought that you were not a horrible person, but apparently you are. And now I'm learning that because you either do or don't like, Panera or whatever it is. And we have a lot of fun because you can just go like, yeah, people like the people kind of understand that other people like different foods. And so like one of the first shows I did, one of the guys was like, I don't like bagels. And I was like, why would you hurt me like that? Why would you come? That's like, we didn't have to get violent. We didn't have to go. But it's, if you can start with that, where you can go like, not liking a TV show or not liking some food, it doesn't really, ruin you. And you can, it's like good training wheel practice for having more serious disagreements. Yeah. Because you realize it's just because someone disagrees with you doesn't mean that they're horrible.
No, it's that a lot of people, especially when it comes to like you said earlier, like the iPhone versus Android debate. It's whatever phone that you got, you're gonna defend that thing to the end of the earth because you don't want to be wrong. And there isn't a better one. It's just that's the funniest thing about all of it. It's just what you like over the other one, your own personal preferences. It's it's a touchy subject with a lot of people. Like they're so just narrow-minded and closed off to anything new, any other type of point of view on the world or their politics or even their favorite pizza place. They don't want to change, and that's something that I do preach. Not really preach. I don't like preaching to people, but it's something that I try to be aware of when I make YouTube videos of like just reminding people to give things a chance. Try something new. You might find out that the way you were doing it wasn't actually the right way, or is a more efficient way of doing things. And so that's just, I think if everyone thought that way, we'd have a lot less problems in the world. Hey, real quick, I wanted to remind you guys about the members area. Yeah, there are some amazing perks by becoming a member of the Spitfire Club, such as extended versions of Just Another Podcast, and extended versions of YouTube videos, and early access to said YouTube videos, and exclusive monthly signed photos sent to your door, and access to the members' exclusive Spitfire Club t-shirt. But that's not all. There is now an exclusive members-only Zoom call. Yeah, we have our club meeting. We sit down, we chat, we talk about things that we're into, things that we're struggling with, things we want to improve, and special guest appearances from other like-minded content creators. It's so much fun. If you want to become a member today, there is a link in the description below. I'll see you in there. Now, you'd mentioned you have a podcast.
Well,
I happened to be on an episode of that, a couple years ago?
Yeah, so there's, I actually help out my wife. She has so this is one of those funny things. I have a thing where, people say, like, what's your name? I say, my name is Steven. And they go, okay, Steve. And I'm just like, not a big deal. But if anybody asks me, what's my name? It's Steven. So people will be like, oh, you have a podcast. I was like, well, actually, it's a radio show. And the difference is that there are certain things we get to do because there's a radio show, and there's certain things we can't do because we're a radio show. So one of the things is we cannot swear. Yeah. We also have to agree to certain lengths of times for our show. So like sometimes podcasts are like, this is coming in at 50 minutes. This one's a minute, hour 7. So I'm involved with all this radio, and it is a radio show. It's over the air. So after it airs, it is effectively like a podcast. You can replay it like a podcast. But my wife does a show called Authenticity Matters, and you came on that show. And I think that it probably is not going to be in the rotation anymore because her show switched to an hour. So she only really has the show is out there somewhere, but the show is for rebroadcast, we're only doing hour shows. And she has a couple of 2-parters, but I help, so I'm an assistant producer on that. Then I am a participant and producer for a show called Rogue Apostles. Then I have my own show, which I do ad hoc, only if I get the right guest. And it's called Tribal Conversations, where it really is me talking to, American Indians, tribal members, indigenous people, and I just go, it's basically what is of concern to you? What is something that you're, looking at now that maybe would be helpful for other people to know about? And that's it. It all just starts from like, I don't know, you tell me. And then I help other people with their shows and get things organized. So I'm kind of like the assistant program director for KXRW, which is community radio in Vancouver. And then
Washington, not Canada.
Yes. And then the other thing is that there's a sister station for KXRW, which is XRAY, which is in Portland, and there's a show called Blazer's Edge, and I'm the engineer for that show. And also, they have a segment called 3 Questions, and I ask the questions.
Ooh,
so
that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, so I'm doing more radio than I ever thought, and I try to have fun with it, and I try to. I'm very fortunate because I had experiences when I was younger, and one of the things I learned was if you're doing something really essential for an organization, then teach somebody else how to do it. Become non-essential as quickly as possible, because the 2 problems of being essential is that people will eventually it'll make it you feel like you have no choice but to do it, and then you'll resent it. The other thing is that there's a tendency for people to be like, well, I do this thing that nobody else can do, so I'm very valuable. My opinion counts, and it's like that's a horrible. Like you should have the same estimation of the worth of your opinion coming in as going out, which is like, look, I'm one person. I believe this, and this is why I believe that, and you should justify your beliefs, like you said, whether it's equipment or whether we were looking at getting new equipment, and I said, well, I think we should get this, and then I said, so what I want to put out there so everybody has input. It has to run the gauntlet, and in between what I suggested and what we got, other people made their opinions known. They justified their opinions, and I was like, oh yeah, I was not thinking about the best equipment. We got better microphones, we got a better audio interface, we got a better setup because everybody gave their input. And if I had the opinion like, well, I'm doing all this stuff, so it's what I say, it would have been worse.
So is your podcasts or I guess radio would just be audio form. Do you do any video stuff for that?
Oh, we don't do any video. I'll take pictures when people come to shows, and I'll include it in some of our promo stuff. But it is very funny. Like you can, the joke is like someone has a face for radio.
Yeah.
I have a face for radio, you know. But you can come in a hoodie and sweats. You don't have to. For women, they don't have to put on makeup. They just show up and be really authentically themselves and not have to worry about one extra step. So that's another nice thing about it. Now, there's a guy who does Rogue Apostles. He also has a show on Shady Pines Radio and on social media called The Smoke Break. And it's a lot about mental health, and it's fantastic. And that's a video podcast. That's also, the audio has its own value, but they do it on video. So, it's like I see the value in all this stuff. Oh
yeah, it's value. I mean, that's why I do video as well as audio because, well, I'm more known for the video stuff, but because it goes on YouTube. I mean, I guess I could release an audio version on YouTube, but the funny thing is, I'm not a huge podcast person. I only listen to a couple, but the ones I do listen to, I like to watch it rather than listen to it. Unless I'm driving like on a trip or something like that. So when I've been wanting to do a podcast for years, and I've only started this about a month ago. You're episode number 5, I think.
Nice.
Just so you know. But yes, or at least every other Friday.
Well, also, and we've talked about this. Once you're going to video, there's something different involved. Now, there's the important maxim that if you have something that has poor audio, no matter how good the video is, nobody's going to watch. But once you're set up, like you can switch views in real time. You can make a video production. You know how to do it in line with what you're doing. For some people, it's really like starting from scratch and making the whole thing. And that's a lot to ask for somebody. And the other thing is that like if you're going to get 2 decent SLRs, you can't really get a big discount on used equipment anymore because everybody knows what they got. So what are you going to get? Like you're going to save $200. So it's like $2,000 for cameras. You want to have maybe like mounted Rode mics, or you want to have mics and have adapters and tripods and everything. By the time that you're finished, just to get simple video that's worth watching, you might be talking about $2,500.
Oh yeah.
For our radio station, we had all these like Pixar lamp things, and I got rid of all of them because I hate them with a red hot passion.
That one there is trash.
Yeah.
As you can tell, I have the nice one.
Yeah, and so what I got these mic stands that came with we bought the mics, and they were like with Sweetwater. Thanks to Sweetwater, fantastic organization, very good with giving advice. So they were like, we have these $30 mic stands that we'll throw in. And I was like, what I should have, if I really knew what I was doing, I would have said, can we get a credit towards another mic stand? Because there's a company that makes one that sometimes you can get for $50 a piece versus 30 where the base is really heavy. So it's meant to have an arm that extends out. So then I had to go to Play It Again Sports and buy $5 weights, unscrew the base of the mic stand, and then put them on and then re-screw them on. And it's still not 100% because the Rode pod mics that we got each weigh 2 pounds. And as you all know from physics and mathematics, it's like cantilever weight. The further out it is, the heavier it is. So that base is like 10 pounds to hold a 2-pound mic out 18 inches.
Yeah.
There are things to keep in mind technologically when you're doing stuff.
I'm a big advocate for like using what you have. Don't let that stop you. If you don't have it, just do it anyway.
Oh yeah.
It may not be as great as it could be, but that's just room for improvement later. You're way better off. There's way more value of just doing it.
You know, it's funny because also, like, I don't know if you've ever done something where you work with somebody else, but you might have a situation where you go like, well, I'll bring in this second person, and you're not really sure what they're going to do, but you trust them. Once you trust them, you could say, hey, well, I was thinking was I was going to do this and you would do this. And then you get into the details. But really they go, oh, you need me to work on something. Like, when do you need me there? You're like, it'll be like Thursday from 3 to 5 at this place. And you agree about what they're going to get paid. And that's it. I was talking to you about getting together because I had a Christmas ornament for you, really more than anything. And I did want to see your studio. And then you're like, well, you could be on my podcast. And then I said, okay, when and where? And that was it because I trust you.
Yeah, well, I trust you too. That's why I'm like, you know what? We're good. I don't have to spell it. Because normally I have a list of people, things to look out for, like how long it's going to be, how long it's going to take. There's a technical aspect. We have to do some testing right beforehand. There's all these other things, but like you can't really know all that. So I was like, I trust you too. It's like,
all I had to do was show up. So that was it. I comb my hair. You know, I mean, I was like, I raised my game. I was like, this is for Chris. This has got to be good.
He looked like $1 million. My YouTube channel is pretty much known for instant photography and like retro type stuff. I do like VHS things once in a while, but the heavy thing is on the channel people love is the instant photography, like Polaroid and Fuji Instax. They have their non-Polaroid photos. People call them Polaroid photos, but they're not. It's like Band-Aid
or Xerox.
Yeah. So. I was wondering if you had any experience with like shooting photography as far as like Polaroids or any sort of film type thing.
I think that I was around Polaroids in like the 70s when you know everything was. Here's the funny thing about film is obviously it was Polaroid. That was your way to take an instant picture. But I went to Washington D.C. when I was in 7th grade, and I think that the camera I had shot like either 110 or 126 film. I can't even tell you what that film is or what that means, but also like it used to be that you'd have these cameras and you'd have a pack of these 4 bulbs. Yeah. And you'd stick them on the camera, almost like a hot shoe, but I don't even think it was a hot shoe.
I literally bought some yesterday.
Yeah, it was like they plug into the camera.
Oh, the cubes.
And then you can use them 4 times. It shoots 1 time and then you rotate it and you rotate it. So that was the camera was actually like a little thin brick. Oh, yeah. You know, like what? So I've used either digital cameras or DSLRs for so long. I haven't used a camera like that really since I was in junior high school. So I can't even explain to you what those cameras were, but they were different format and they were just cheaper, you know, kind of instant camera. They weren't instant cameras like a Polaroid, but they were just you know, point and shoot, simple cameras.
Yeah, sure. So you don't own any like that stuff now?
No, and in fact, so my father got into photography when he's probably about 16 years old, which was back before the turn of the century, back in the 20th century. And the one thing that was really great is that he got technically proficient. I think he was developing a lot of his own film, black and white, but he was going around like New York in the late 40s and taking pictures of stuff. So there's a famous, down in the Wall Street area of Manhattan, there's a famous statue of George Washington. And with these stairs, and in movies, they've had like things where things blow up there because it's kind of a famous place. And he has a picture there with people walking around and every single man has a fedora. Like every single man. It's crazy.
That was the thing.
And he has pictures of family from, from that time. And it's really like amazing. And then my father put together, he had small cameras that were very advanced. He had Leica cameras.
Ooh,
he had he eventually was like using Nikon primarily. And then he would have the grip that bolted onto the bottom and then came off and that would plug in off the hot shoe.
The flash, yeah.
And he had the really good like Pentax flashes and all that stuff. And then one day my father was like, it's not convenient to schlep around. Like he had gotten a thing that if you could have put like those little hands they have from Archie McPhee, the little hands that go on the end of your finger.
Oh, sure, yeah.
If my father could have had something like that and went like this and taken a picture, he would have done that. He got to the point where it was like all he wanted was a light, small thing. Yeah. And you'd be like, well, you don't have as much control. And he's like, I don't care anymore.
Yeah.
And now my brother has all that equipment and he doesn't take any film pictures.
That's why I like shooting on instant photography mostly, because like the audience listening to this right now doesn't know this, but I ran into some major tech issues before we started recording. It turns out it was something stupidly obvious. I should have seen it right away, but I was unplugging things, going through some crazy stuff. And then afterwards, I got to go through and edit and do some things to it. It's just a lot of work to get a finished product. And it's like, so when it comes to Polaroid, it's like I step out of that and just push one button and then there's a picture. It's done. It's over with. It's a cool memory. I could put on a wall and it's tangible. It's not digital. It's just really cool, I think. And that's why I love it.
I understand why people want to use calculators. I absolutely understand that. But it is important to learn long division so that you know what you're doing when you use a calculator. For example, I think that understanding the precepts because you've gone through the process is important. So, for instance, I took some photography classes with a guy who's really, really great, and he shoots a DSLR and he shoots JPEGs.
Ooh.
Right? Why does he shoot JPEGs? Because he was a film photographer for so long that his shots are right in the camera. And the thing that he hates to do more than anything else is sit in front of a computer and do digital editing.
That's fair.
Right? So, which is a little bit like walking across a tightrope without a net. Well, if you're a flying Wallenda, like maybe that's okay. But for me, I like knowing that I can fix it in post. But if you understand the principles of lighting,
sure.
If you understand like the things where you're like, I'm going to take a picture of a little color box, and then I'll know that like when I make the red on screen looks like the red in the color box, and like that that understanding. I mean, it saves you a lot of time. In fact, if you look at like Pixar versus Leica makes every frame right, and then they capture it. They get if they want a certain texture, they sew little clothes for their characters, and they have the right texture. They get the lighting, they get the color, they get everything right, and then they capture it. And so they don't do as much stuff in post, whereas in Pixar, they do everything digitally, right from the get-go. And I think it's really important to understand both ways of operating because it streamlines the process. And now what we're having is things like special effects aren't being done in front of green screens. They're being done in some version of volumes, which are studios with LED displays all around, so that if you're looking at a giant blue creature, that blue will reflect on you.
Yeah.
And then you just react to like, this is a giant blue creature, because it's there.
Yeah.
And that's streamlining the process.
Yeah.
And that's really, really great. Understanding the origins of technology so that you can make better use of streamlined, slicker, new versions really will help you.
Oh, no, for sure. The only thing I would say against like doing just JPEG would probably come down to if you're printing your photos. If you want to get like a large print of it, it's like you're going to lose some of that detail because it's compressed at that point.
I think that there is a form of JPEG which is like very little compression.
But
and unless your
camera, though, doesn't do that.
Yeah, I mean, I shoot in RAW. Once someone told me, like, you should absolutely shoot in RAW. That was kind of a different animal. But for I agree with you that he should be capturing RAW because it's the best thing. But this guy is a professional photographer, print magazines, like everything. He's, no BS, and he just doesn't want to be doing editing after the fact. And I actually get that, and he also knows where to spend his money. So if you like, flashes are nice, but if you want to be really serious about it, you should get a strobe. So you're talking about getting a strobe, which is a studio quality flash, and then you can use it outside, but you probably need to have a battery pack or some sort of backup power. Even sometimes outside you can plug in stuff, but then you want to have a Pocket Wizard. Pocket Wizard sends a radio signal. So I have a flash, and if it bounces off of something to the flash, it'll trigger.
Sure, it uses a slave, is what it's called. It was faster than the slave.
Right, but but if you have to have it bounce light, it doesn't always work. If you're at a place where there's nothing to reflect on, you just don't get the reflection. So it won't trigger your flash. So that's where something like a Pocket Wizard, and there's a lot of different versions of that, but he has his setup is amazing. Strobes, he's got the Pocket Wizards, he's got a light meter that he will hold out in front of a subject, and then he's able to trigger his flashes and get a light meter reading right at the source. And then he can manually adjust his flashes.
It's kind of interesting because he doesn't want to do editing because it takes time, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah.
But how much time did it go into just doing all of that to get it perfect or right? So if the way I see it is like, maybe if you just didn't do some of those things, you got to go in post, maybe take a minute or two to fix it. It's probably still faster than it would have done to just done all these crazy elaborate things.
It's like, let's say you could ride your bike from your house and it's like 45 minutes, or you could ride 5 minutes and catch a bus, and then 5 more minutes, and so like the whole thing takes a half hour.
Sure.
And you go, but it's like someone could be like, but I like riding my bike. And that's what it really comes down to. It's not about the time. He doesn't want to spend the time editing because he doesn't like editing.
Okay, so that's different. Sure.
So, which again is like, I've never heard him say you should like be dogmatic. You got to do it this way. He actually says like, this is how I like to do it. My whole background is I capture the image correctly in the camera, and then after that, I'm good to go. And I get that. I would still say as a backup to this, like hundreds of reasons to back up, have it raw.
Oh yeah,
because you can just solve so many problems.
Yeah. I try to not over edit my photos. I do very minimal editing to photos. I guess it does depend on what it's for, the use case. Like my YouTube thumbnails, I guess those are pretty edited. But if I do landscapes or whatever, I don't do some of these things that people do where they do sky replacements and they start dropping in like this, put it in the sun and rays and do all that stuff. I'm like, yeah, it looks cool. I guess if that's what you're going for, but now it's basically kind of like, a painting.
Yeah, exactly.
A digital painting kind of.
That is exactly.
There's nothing wrong with it, but
I think that here's the issue. Somebody who is doing a digital painting based on photography has to disclaim this was
manipulated.
This is an aggregate of elements. This is not necessarily how it looked. So it's not journalistic.
Yeah.
I don't care if you want to take a picture of Anne Hathaway on the red carpet and make it look like she has two heads, which I think people will automatically get that's fake. By all means, do it. It's art. Do whatever you want.
There's no wrong way.
But if someone was saying like, "Oh my God, I didn't realize that Anne Hathaway actually has two heads," that's problematic. So I have a feeling that there's a part of photography that is a record of the truth. And I try to make it look how it did, but of course, there's I'll bring out some of the
like reds or greens,
or reduce the amount of stuff that's back in the shadows.
Sure.
I went to Ireland, and I went to this place called the Rock of Cashel, and it's a former church that's like ruins, but it's really impressive. And they were doing some work, so they had that orange like rubberized netting, and that stuff, of course, looks horrible.
Yeah.
But also, it's not always there. I'm not getting back to the Rock of Cashel tomorrow. So what I did was I photoshopped it out.
Yeah.
Now, I will tell people like, hey, there was netting there and I photoshopped it out. So I think it's important that I provide that detail first. So someone looks at the picture and I said, look, if it wasn't for the fact they were doing construction, I'm actually making it be truer to how it looks. It's the same thing where like, if someone's like, I have crow's feet, can you take them out of the picture? I will not do it.
Yeah, I don't do that stuff either.
But I will take out a zit.
Oh, yeah.
Because the zit is temporary.
Yep.
And so if you want to be flattering there, that's fair. And you also don't want to force someone to have to live with something that wasn't always there. So like Cindy Crawford famously has a mole that became almost like her calling card. I think that probably early on in a career that there were people who airbrushed those out, that out. And I think that like, you just go, look, that's how they look. That's fine. And I think that you have to be very careful with editing. And like I said, you can do editing and you can make it look like you're talking to JFK, and that's fine. But in case there's any doubt, you should be willing to say, that way that you don't always have to have that like, well, the court had to go and forensically look at like some of the original metadata of the picture and to see if it was altered. I do very little bitmap
like Amber
manipulation.
Heard. No. But yeah, so I think along the lines, that's hard to say, along the lines as you do, that I try to keep it true to what it is. So like, let's say I take a picture of the Golden State Bridge or Golden Gate Bridge. I don't know why I say Golden State Bridge. Golden Gate Bridge. And because I was in San Francisco.
It's funny because Golden State Bridge sounds right.
It does sound right. I wonder if it's like one of those like misconception things like Oregon. But yeah, so I try. So let's say I'm taking a picture of it. Let's say it's going to be used in like a journal or something, like for a magazine, and I Photoshop in like a galaxy sky, like a beautiful night sky or something into it, but that's clearly can never happen. I think there's a time and place for it. The whole point of me saying this too, because you can make it art. Like there's this really cool artist out there that's done, like they've taken World War II photos and put in, like photoshopped in like Star Wars aspects of it. Like they're fighting the war, like on the Empire side. There's like little the TIE fighters and stuff in the sky or Death Star. And I think that's pretty cool. And it's fun. I mean, obviously it's not real, but it's not supposed to be real, but it looks cool. And
well, I think what's sad is one of the reasons why even more important is because if you want to, sometimes a photograph or a video is evidence. It's important that people there's a documentary aspect. You wouldn't want to have someone go into a war environment and start manipulating pictures. Like you don't want someone like, oh, and in the background there's someone getting beheaded or something like that. Like you don't want to provide false information. So there's a point where pictures and videos are documentary evidence. And I think that when it comes to that, you shouldn't play around with that kind of stuff. And sometimes there's a matter of, respect.
No, for
like
sure.
if somebody something horrible happened to somebody, you wouldn't want to be like, oh, like, I mean,
like make a parody of it or mock it kind of type, or decredit it in a sense to like
sometimes
make it less impactful.
Lee Harvey Oswald was assassinated by Jack Ruby, and people have taken the picture with all the cops escorting him and have made it look like they're playing in a band.
Oh, sure.
And that's one of those things where it's like time has gone on.
Yeah.
It's like most of the people involved aren't around anymore.
Yeah.
And it's more edgy humor, but it's not like it.
Meme culture is a whole other topic.
Like I would never take, say, some of the photographic or the visual evidence of like 9/11.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't do artificial stuff with that. And now there are some people who might take someone falling and like put in like an angel and like, well, they're going to be okay. And they're not really being disrespectful of the event or the people, but I would still like shy away from that.
Yeah.
And
I've seen that stuff though.
And I would be like, the same thing where like that people do that a lot, in military situations, and it's like that's one of those things where like, okay, first of all, that it was edited, and second of all, it's like it's not for me, but I don't think it's inherently disrespectful. It's just their artistic viewpoint on it, without being disrespectful to the people that it happened to. Fair enough.
Yeah.
I think that just the first person to ask ask yourself, like, is this something that I think is offensive? Like, I gotta be honest, is it? And if you don't go no, then sometimes maybe ask somebody else before you put it out there. Now, I know somebody, they've since passed away, unfortunately. They're visual artists, and they do a lot of stuff that is very like atomic looking and kind of not cartoonish, but very artistic. And they came up with this brilliant take on a famous photograph that was taken in Palm Springs, and the photograph is known as Poolside Gossip, and it was taken by I think it was like, it wasn't Slim Pickens, but it was another guy. I think his name was Slim. Famous photographer, took pictures of very wealthy people living the good life. So they went to this famous house that was owned by this guy who had a lot of money, and they asked some of their friends. They said, like, hey, invite your friends over, some people from Palm Springs, and we'll have a party, and I'll just take pictures of it. So they had it wasn't a picture of stars. It was a picture of like luminaries from Palm Springs, and the photograph is known as Poolside Gossip, and there's these two women talking to each other. And what the guy did was he did a drawn or like painted version where the women look like they are tiki heads, which of course is kind of garish and exaggerated and not necessarily flattering. So he had this brilliant idea, because like there's tiki bars in Palm Springs, and people kind of it all kind of worked together. And then right before he was going to release it, one of the women in the picture, who was going to be speaking at a Palm Springs modernism conference they have every year, died.
Oh.
And he's like, I can't release it at the thing where she was going to talk at, because it could be come off as disrespectful. Sure. So he eventually released it, because it wasn't, and it was really brilliant, but he didn't release it at that time.
Yeah.
So
it's a unique thing that I'm even me. I mean, I've had to learn myself going through this. Is like, I don't see. I'm so comfortable like in front of a camera, and I'm so comfortable taking pictures taken of me. I don't care at this point. Like, okay, you took a video of me, you took a picture. It really doesn't matter. And so other people, though, that's where you have to start taking into account that they don't think that way. Like some things that I don't care about, people are like super nervous about. They're super like, I'm afraid to hear myself talk. Oh, I've got a little blemish here. Can you shoot from the other side or do this and that? And like, you really got to pay attention and be very respectful when you're just taking a picture. I had an incident happen this year. I went down to San Francisco, and I went to the Stranger Things experience. I don't know if you've heard of that or what that is.
Yeah. My niece is really into Stranger Things. Yeah. She went to one of those.
Yeah. I went to it. It was awesome. Had a great time. I almost got kicked out for taking a picture. But the scenario was somebody asked me to take a picture of them with my own Polaroid camera, and I guess they didn't know what a Polaroid camera was, but anyway, I took a picture of them, I gave it to them, therefore there is one in existence. Mm-hmm. They now own the photo. And then the parent goes and tells security that I'm going around taking pictures of minors, even though her kids, it was a portrait with her mom and these two kids, but these kids were like 15 and maybe 17 years old type of thing. And I had to get talking to because I can't go around taking pictures, and I almost got thrown out for it. And so stuff like that, you really have to pay attention to. Even when you are asked to take a picture of somebody, think about it first.
Well, this guy, Michael, who teaches, he's been teaching photography classes at like Portland community colleges for a long, long time, and does things at his own studio, and he's really cares about other people learning photography. And one of the first things he will tell you is that if you're going to take photographs of other people, get releases,
sure,
get waivers. He says, and I believe that he's right, having not looked this up myself, but he posits that photographers get sued. Their business gets sued more than anybody else. So he's always like, be very, very careful. Mm-hmm. My feeling with photography is always, when I take a picture of somebody, then the people who own that photograph are me and that person. Now, I'm not selling the picture,
sure,
so me putting it up for no money is like if you were in public or whatever, I took the picture, that's it.
Mm-hmm.
But if I was going to make money off a picture where I would contact the person and say, like, I'm about to make money on this picture, is that okay? I will give you like part of the proceeds,
Sure,
but I need your permission. But I would also ask someone who I've taken a picture, I've given them the picture, and they say, I'm going to now sell this. I would say to them, you need to contact me about approval for me for selling it, and you need to give me some of the money.
interesting.
Because I feel like we co-own it. I took it, they were in it, and then so we co-own it. So it's consent is a really important thing.
Yeah,
Really super important in so many ways. And it's so funny because I'm seeing that people are getting better and better at it, and people will be like, "Oh, I'm gonna take a selfie. You're in the background. Is it okay if you're in the background?" Like, it's just a really simple question to ask. But when it comes to selling a picture, I think that it's consent among the people who are involved in creating it.
Yeah, it's copyright is an interesting topic because technically, there's shady ways to go about this, just really disgusting ways to go about it, honestly. But what it comes down to, because there's been like lawsuits for this particular thing. Like someone took a picture of somebody, and technically, whose ever brain and camera took it owns the copyright, not the actual the model or the other person.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you can be a scumbag and just be like, I stole this for $1 million, it's mine. Or you can do what you're doing and be like, hey, here's part of the money that I made, which I feel is the right way, and that's how I would handle it too. But technically, you're not obligated to do that. Release forms eliminate the option of hassle of getting sued for something later on, which then you'll have to prove that you took the photo and it's your equipment that you own. Because that's the other thing that I've had trouble with clients, where I'm kind of sort of going through one right now, to be honest. Not a big deal or anything like that. But when I'm a private contractor and I'm on like their payroll type of situation where it's just a monthly thing that comes in, but I'm an independent contractor. I am not their employee. I have my own equipment. If I shoot their content, it goes on their channel, but it's my content. Like, it's my videos.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I could just cut it up and release it to make my own like highlight reel if I wanted to demo my work or something. Right. Now, flip that around. If I'm being paid by them monthly and they're supplying me equipment and the computers and stuff, they own 100% of it, regardless of me pushing that record button.
Mm-hmm.
But copyright's an interesting thing, and there's a lot of crazy lawsuits that have gone down because of that stuff.
I think the big thing is to try to be upfront with people.
Sure.
I mean, this is where I think that people are getting a better sense of it when it comes to intimacy.
Yes.
Very interesting case that's come up right now is Olivia Hussey was in a movie when she was 15 years old. She was in Romeo and Juliet in 1968. When she was 14 or 15 years old.
Yes, I just read this morning.
And
I think you might have shared that today on Facebook.
I don't think I shared it,
or something.
But it's been around because it's a really big deal. She and her co-star, who was 16 at the time, who were children, were filmed naked.
Yeah, I saw this movie in high school. I was shocked. I remember seeing this. I was like, why are they showing this in high school? And these are kids.
I remember seeing it when I was in
I was like a freshman, I think.
junior high school or high school, and I remember seeing that it might have been edited so that it was not like a full-on nudity, but like there was a scene where she rolls out of bed.
Yeah, that's the one I saw.
And so like, okay, so she's nude, but like I
was full frontal. Like she came out of the bed and it was like full frontal.
Yeah, the one that I saw when I was in school, she didn't just go like, but she was talking about it fairly recently. It was like, it was kind of ahead of its time, and like we were okay with it. But all of a sudden, then there's this suit, and the guy who shot it is dead. I'm like, it's kind of a weird thing.
It's like a little late.
I'm kind of keeping my eye on it a little bit, but if you go to someone's house and you're like, people don't like this because they feel like it cuts away from the flow. But if you ask the right way, it actually is better. But you could be like, hey, I'm really interested in doing this. Like, is that are you down for that? You're being pretty clear, but also you're getting consent.
So this is a great little segue, I guess. We could talk about this. Kind of interesting. Kind of goes along right with that. like I'll add to it a little bit. So you mentioned it earlier. I was dating somebody out of high school, and I ended up getting married pretty young. I was 22. I guess not too young, but I mean young. But anyway, we got divorced.
I just want to say for the record, if you're getting married before you're 25, you're making a big mistake.
Okay, I would probably agree with that based on my experience, especially marrying your high school sweetheart and all that. It's like I felt like I missed my 20s because we got divorced in 2017. And so I was 27 at the time, and I just entered the dating world in the modern day, like Tinder and these apps and all this crazy stuff, and consents is scary because hearing all these stories of like people like they hooked up the night before and one of them's having second doubts, and now the guy's life is ruined. Yeah, because they felt like they were raped or whatever, and so I was like having to deal with this for the first time, never even having to date or enter the dating world before. It was like I was an alien, like crashed on a planet and had to kind of like piece this together. And so like consent is a huge thing, especially, major consent for like romantic partners and stuff. But as a photographer or a content creator of any kind, like, yes, you own the copyrights to stuff if you hit that record button, but you can get some major backlash, major issue. Like there's so much responsibility that's on your plate that getting consent can eliminate a lot of that. And getting the consent either verbally on camera, say, can I use this? That counts. Yeah. Or in writing, getting that written down and signed and said that you're good to go. So if they try something, you'll have a small headache, but it'll be eliminated rather quickly. It's a unique thing too, because there's the whole consent thing too, but on the other side of it, you kind of hold a lot of power in a sense. Like if you film something, on the worst case scenario, it could ruin someone's life. Yeah. And you might not even notice some of the things that are going on, something they may have said out of context. They may be the greatest person in the world, but today in cancel culture and everything, they may say a joke.
They could even say something like, you're on camera, and in the background, they could be like, so the full conversation is like, oh, I couldn't believe it. I met this guy and he said, and then they can repeat the horrible thing they said, and then you're just filming the thing and you edit in and they say that horrible thing, and they're like, this person said a horrible thing. It's like, and then it's a lot of like even today, we have Jen sets up, she has a guest, and I say, look, the way we treat you is you're our guest. We want to get you water if you want it, soda if you want it. There's a bathroom over here, and the thing is, you are our guest. We want you to look good. Mm-hmm. So if you decide that you said something you didn't like, it's recorded, we'll take it out.
Yeah, I'm the same way.
If you want to stop in the middle and say, hold on, let me re-say that, we can edit it. Because we want you to look good. And so it's that getting ahead of things and consent. But the other thing is, if you go to Multnomah Falls and there's somebody up on the Benson Bridge, I think, and you take pictures of the falls and they're up there and they're like, wait a second, I didn't give you permission to be, like, look, you're out. You're outdoors and no one can. Your own mother.
Public's different. Public can be tricky too, but also you're out in public. You kind of already consenting to be like on camera, unless you're on private property. You gotta know this stuff especially when you hold a camera.
I rarely take pictures of people without their permission.
Yeah. But I try to get the back of their heads and stuff so you can't see any of their faces. I rarely take pictures of people. It's very, very. If I'm asked, I'll do it. But for them, like I don't like having pictures of random strangers. Even though I do have one that, because when I was at the Stranger Things experience, someone saw me take that picture and they thought I worked there. And so I told them I don't work there. And they said, but who cares? Take my picture. So I took the picture and then I was giving them the photo. They just walked away. So I have a random picture of this another mom and two kids that I have no idea who they are.
Occasionally I'll be at a place and I have a much better camera and I know what I'm doing.
Sure.
And I'll say to someone, look, give me your email address.
Oh, I've done that too.
I'll send you the picture. And people are like really excited about that.
Well, thank you, Steve, for coming in. I really appreciate you chatting and going down some of these fun little rabbit holes and our discussions. And I could talk to you for hours, so we should probably wrap it up now. But any final words or thoughts that you want to plug, maybe your podcast and some of the projects that you've got going on?
Well, I mean, the short answer is, I work in community radio in Portland and in Vancouver. So in Vancouver, it's KXRW, which is 99.9 FM. It's also KXRW FM, and it streams live. And then there's XRAY in Portland, which is XRAY.FM, also is 107.1. And now they're actually broadcasting out in like Nehalem, out on the coast. But there's a lot of really good community radio out there. It's music that you don't normally hear. It's a lot of information that isn't as easy to get. And so I would plug, community radio as hard as I can. And then of course, of all the shows that you should probably listen to, Authenticity Matters, because it's my wife's show.
Yeah, you got to plug the wife's show.
And it's the second Thursday of the month from 12 to 1. So it's coming up next week, next Thursday.
This goes out this Friday, so.
Okay, so it's like the 12th? January 12th. So yeah. whenever if January 12th is a week ago, then go to KXRW.FM and look for Authenticity Matters and then just listen to the show after the fact. But if it's beforehand, then just listen live.
Well, probably have to have you back on in the future too to go down some of these wonderful rabbit holes.
Yeah, well, I mean, what you should do is do something interesting, and then I'll come in and talk about how wonderful I thought it was.
Oh, thanks. I always love talking about myself and how great I am.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Ooh, man, was that a super fun episode. I haven't seen Steven in a little while, so it was great to reconnect and catch up with him. But the conversations that we had were really, really great. We went down some serious rabbit holes. And full disclosure, I ran into some tech issues and unfortunately lost a good chunk of those conversations. So we're going to have him back in the studio and talk about some of those really cool, deep rabbit hole conversations. We'd love to know your thoughts on today's episode. And thank you so much for watching, because this is actually a video form podcast as well as an audio one over on YouTube and Spotify. Well, that brings us to a close on episode 5 of Just Another Podcast. Now, get out there, make some art.